This is dHunter and my lovely wife Patricia bringing you yet another Star Trek movie review. How many more are there? Well, there are 13 Star Trek movies and we're on number 11. We're going to be reviewing Star Trek from 2009 by J.J. Abrams, the Star Trek Reboot. Now, when this movie came out, Star Trek was effectively dead. Star Trek as a franchise had Star Trek Nemesis, his last movie in 2002, 7 years prior, and there was nothing on TV. For the first time in about 30 years, the Star Trek franchise was kind of on hold. It had gotten a little bit stale, and no movies, no shows, no nothing for the first time in forever. And of course, like all things TV and movie-wise, it gets a reboot. So J.J. Abrams pitched doing a reboot with the original cast, showing how, their younger days, how they sort of got to where they are, got the command of the ship, etc., etc., etc. And it seems like, okay, that's a prequel. But no, not only that, it's a reboot of sorts. They go back in time, alter events, giving you a completely fresh timeline, and personally, I found that idea offensive. What appeals to me about Star Trek is how big it is. There's like 750 episodes. There were 10 movies at the time, and they're just expanding upon itself and growing the lore, growing the canon, and trying to be consistent. Yeah, there's some inconsistencies, but for the most part, they do a pretty good job of building, world building, and canon building, and all this stuff for Star Trek. So, reboot in itself, I almost find the idea offensive. But it is what it is. They wanted to be able to have, you're not like, oh, well, Scotty's not going to die and Kirk's not going to die because they're still there 30 years later. They wanted to have this sort of open canvas to do whatever they wanted to, and I get it. But there's a lot of things I don't like about the idea of rebooting it, and I'm really happy that the newer shows are back in the Prime timeline. So we have the Prime timeline that takes place in Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Design, Voyager, Enterprise, Hell, Picard, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, all those shows. And then we have the Kelvin timeline, which takes place in these 3 new movies. So this movie came out in 2009. Star Trek had a little break, not too long. And it was pretty successful. It's shot very uniquely. J.J. Abrams has always wanted to do Star Wars. And I guess since he got the chance to do Star Trek, it's the next best thing. And of course, when they did do Star Trek The Force Awakens, he jumped ship from Star Trek, worked on that. I think he was involved with the other Star Trek films, and he also did the 9th Star Wars film, so kind of back and forth, and I personally don't really think one person should be controlling both Star Wars and Star Trek. No one should have that much power. So the movie itself, here, let me check on the dates here real quick. Took some notes down, but so the movie, I guess, jumps off from a future point in 2387, which is about 10 years before Picard. That's when Romulus is destroyed. Then Spock, the old Spock, goes back in time to 2233 when the USS Kelvin gets destroyed. Most of the movie takes place in 2258, 25 years later. And the original show took place in 2266 to 2269, about 10 years after the events of this movie. And this movie is not a direct prequel. It contradicts a lot of things established in the show, and blah, 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 but I get it. They want to do their own thing. What do you think? Good idea? Bad idea? Personally, I hated the idea at the time. I've warmed up to it a little bit. I don't know. What did you think? I don't know if we were even following it at the time, but when I heard about Star Trek Rebot, I was kind of like, ugh, that's exactly not what I wanted. The opposite of what I wanted. I wanted a new, fresh take on Star Trek in the same universe, continuing on. Hell, I didn't even want a prequel movie, but I would have rather had a prequel movie in the Prime universe. Were you even following things when it came out?
I definitely was not following things when it came out. But I did enjoy the differences. The different ideas on the different timelines, the different universes, that kind of thing.
I enjoyed it, and I didn't enjoy it. I thought the Prime universe was dead forever at this point, and they were going to just move forward with the Kelvin universe, and I'm so happy they restored things. So it makes me appreciate these movies for what they are and accept them into Star Trek canon. And they do have things in this movie that is relevant to the overall Star Trek universe, and I appreciate that as well. So the movie starts off, you see the USS Kelvin, and it's a kind of dumb-looking ship. I mean, it's a saucer and then 2 warp ray sails on top and bottom. And it looks like something that would be in Star Trek, and it looks like something that would fit into the Star Trek original series timeline. And it just has this shot where you see the saucer section and sort of passing over, and then it just passes over USS, and like it's any Star Trek fan would know, like right then, okay, bam, I'm in Star Trek, I'm in the Star Trek universe, this is a Star Trek ship, this is the Federation, Starfleet, and they do a really good job. The way it's shot, it's sleek, it looks fantastic. So you see this ship, and, you know, there's a crew on there. They encounter this giant vessel that turns out to be a Romulan ship. I mean, it's like
bigger than a planet.
25 times bigger than a ship. Well, I wouldn't say bigger than a planet, but it's huge, and it's almost ridiculously huge.
Yes.
Now, in the official prequel comic series to this, it explains that Nero has like Borg technology and all that stuff. None of that matters. None of that's even canon at this point because those events didn't happen in that comic series. B4 turned into Data, and they brought him back. But if you watch Picard, even though that was canon at the time, throw it out the window. It doesn't matter. So Nero's ship's there. We have the Kelvin. A huge fight breaks out, and you even hear the Captain Rebot or something like that, and he's talking to Kirk, and you think, "Oh, this is James Kirk right here. Cool. He looks good." And it turns out that's his father, and it's actually really well done. The Kelvin gets completely destroyed with these torpedoes. The Romulan gets on the view screen and says, "Captain, bring yourself on a shuttle to my ship. Your refusal to cooperate would be unwise." And really, he has no choice. He has, I don't know, hundreds of people on this ship. And he knows if he doesn't go, they're going to destroy the ship. So he's going to die either way. He might as well go to give the ship a chance to escape. He goes on to the Romulan vessel. The captain's just sitting there, not saying a word. They keep asking him, "Do you know the location of Ambassador Spock?" And they show, and it's Leonard Nimoy, old Spock. You're kind of confusing. Why would we be looking for old Spock in this? You don't really know what's going on at this point, and it's very well done. He kills Captain Reboot, or God, I can't fully remember his name. It's something like that. Then they start firing on the ship, and at this point, Kirk's in command. You find out his wife is pregnant, delivering a baby during this huge battle, of course, just, you know, making everything so high in tension, everything. And the designs look good. Like, when the shuttle left the ship with the captain to the Romulan ship, I'm like, you know what? They have updated looks of the original series stuff, but it looks good. It looks like it would fit in that universe. I had no problem with those updated designs. Very good. The shuttle, the ships, even the way the Enterprise looks in the movie. Cool. Like, no problem. It's familiar, but different, sleek, updated. No problem with any of that. I actually like the redesigns, and I think it fits, you know, it's very familiar and not at the same time.
It draws in a new generation.
It does. This whole point of these movies is to draw in a new generation, and it's very action-packed. It has a very Star Wars feel to it, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it loses some of the cerebral exploration piece. It doesn't lose all of it. It doesn't lose all of it, and they bring that up, they mention it. And a lot of times the movies are action-packed, they're high stakes, and, you know, this, that, and the other. I have such mixed feelings on it. I like it, I don't like it. As a whole, I like it, and at this point, now that it's been, oh my God, 15 years ago, I've warmed up to it quite a bit. I had a lot of negative feelings at the beginning just because of the whole reboot aspect, and now that it's, you know, in the past, I appreciate it a lot more than I did at the time. But it is entertaining. It's a fun movie. So Kirk forces his wife to go onto a shuttle. They leave. She's literally delivering the baby right then and there, and he's about to go join them, but then one of the torpedoes knocks out their autopilot. It says manual control only or something like that, so he has to stay on board the ship and make a suicide run, kamikaze, crash into Nero's ship to buy everyone else time to escape. And it works. While he's in there, of course, his wife delivers the baby on the shuttle, and you can hear the baby crying at one point when he has like 30 seconds left to live. They're arguing whether they're going to name him. Let's name him after your father, Tiberius. Like, oh, that's awful. Let's name him after your father, Jim. Let's call him Jim. And then, of course, James Tiberius Kirk. So it kind of explains his name. Cool. I like it. It works. And it's kind of dramatic. It's
very dramatic.
It's extremely dramatic, but I swear the first time you see it, you're damn near going to shed some tears at this point, because it's well done. And you think it's kind of sad, because you have this woman that's going to have to raise a kid by herself. You have this guy who hears his baby, and he can't do anything, and he knows what he has to do to save him. And he ends up saving, 250 lives or 400 lives or something like that. He crashed into Nero's ship, and honestly, like, if you think about it, Nero's ship is so big, and the shields would be so strong, it would have really done not much. But I guess it disables it or hurts it enough that the shuttles are able to escape. What you don't see is, in deleted scenes of the movie, at this point, a whole Klingon armada decloaks, and while Nero's ship is damaged from the Kelvin, they actually take him to a Klingon prison, Ropenthe, and keep him there for the next 20 or 18 years or whatever it is. None of that's in the film, but you can see the deleted scenes on YouTube, and it's very interesting. I'm kind of surprised they took that out, but I understand the movie was like a full 2 hours long. They had to shave it down. But it does I think that's a part that I would love to see reincorporated if there was a director's cut, which of course there isn't. But the ship battle looks fantastic. The only thing I don't like is it's more like pew 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 instead of the beam phasers, which is what I'm used to. And it has a little bit of both. But like the Enterprise later is just firing a whole bunch of the little laser blasts, and it has more of a Star Wars than a Star Trek feel to me. The look of everything in the movie looks good. The Starfleet uniform looks good. The ship looks good. The way it's shot, lens flares a little too much. But it all looks good. The sleek design. It doesn't look like the original series. And I just know a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't look like the original series. Oh, my God. You have to just accept this is like 40-some years later. They're going to have to update it.
Yes.
I mean, when Next Generation came out, they sort of circumvented that issue by making it, 80 or 100 years after the original show. This one takes place before the original show, looks much more advanced, but you just have to just get past those sort of things. Like, it is what it is. If they made it look old and crappy, it wouldn't be successful. It's just the way people are nowadays. So at this point, you have Kirk born, Kelvin timeline established, Kelvin destroyed, and Nero's ship is disabled, and you don't really know what happens. Then, shoot ahead, I don't know, a couple years later, you see a young Kirk. Yeah, this part is so dumb. And he's on Earth. Now, you have to bear in mind, maybe this is not... Like, Kirk was always known as a risk-taker and, all that sort of stuff.
Rebel.
But in this universe, he would not have been raised by his father. He's, like, raised by his uncle or something, because that's whose car he stole in this part. But he would turn out a completely different guy. His father died when he was born, so he didn't have, the Starfleet captain raising him and sort of ingraining all these, Starfleet beliefs in him, etc., etc. But he still turns out to be the pretty much same guy. He's a risk-taker. Although he doesn't go to Starfleet, he's kind of a...
misfit.
Yeah, misfit. He's, getting drunk, fighting, doesn't care about that sort of stuff. It's almost like he doesn't like Starfleet, or maybe, I don't know, has bad feelings because his father got killed in line of duty, so he's kind of like, resentful toward them. But there's a scene on old Earth, and you just see a car driving. Of course, it's an old car. Even to today's standards, it's an old car. I mean, that thing would be like 250 years old or whatever, and it makes very little sense. At the same time, people do like antiques, and keep a car running. I'm just saying, and honestly, you could replicate any part you needed. It really wouldn't be that hard to keep it running.
I guess when you say it like that.
But he's driving this car, and there's like, you hear his uncle tell him, bring the car back, that car's an antique, blah, 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 and, he ignores him. And, like, a police officer comes to try to stop him, and it's like a robot police officer, at least you don't really know. That's the impression I got. It kind of made me think like he's a robot, but he has, I don't know. No,
it's just, it's the
Earth
cycle
cops.
That...
Well, but he has his mask, I don't know, it just looks weird. But then Kirk drives the car, what appears to be intentionally, off a cliff, like braking right at the last second and then jumping right at the last second.
But mind you, during this time, they're playing, Beastie Boys?
Beastie Boys, yeah.
Which would then still be, like, 200 years
it'd
old.
Be
it's like, it...
classical music at that point. And I think they actually make a reference to that in one of the later films. The part's just dumb. And yes, it shows Kirk's this risk-taker, and, he wants to have thrills-seeker, but it's just dumb. It's dumb, and it's so unrealistic, where he turns the car, literally drives off a cliff. He must really hate his uncle, because that's a dick move right there. And then, he climbs out of there and establishes here's Kirk. Then he goes to Vulcan with a young Spock, and of course he's doing all these computer tests. He's extremely smart, as Vulcans are, but he's half human, so... The other Vulcans are teasing him, which is actually illogical. Honestly, it doesn't really, I don't think they...
But they're still learning at that point.
I mean, sure. I guess they would have... they would have some racist feelings toward a half-human. They sort of half-breed. He's contaminated. And they're making fun of him. Eventually, they tell his dad's a traitor and his mom's a whore and all this stuff. Then he punches them, attacks them. His dad's, talking to him, and he's like, they called you a traitor. And he's like, your emotions are stronger than all of us, all that sort of stuff. That scene with Spock and the computers kind of makes me feel like it's an homage to Star Trek IV at the opening, when he just got brought back to life at Planet Vulcan, and he's there taking all these different tests. They're asking him 7 different questions at the same time. He's answering them all. It kind of makes me feel like it was like that. And I enjoy those little Easter eggs. This movie is full of Easter eggs and references. I probably missed some of them, honestly, but that's stuff I like. Like, J.J. Abrams, whoever wrote this, all the people involved, they were very familiar with the franchise, and they knew what they were doing. They did a good job of connecting things, although some things don't make sense.
But you also don't really know
canon-wise.
if what else may have been deleted or...
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, some stuff does contradict established canon, and I'm a stickler for canon to a point. But that's the whole point of this, is Reboot, so you can ignore canon, but they did it in a very specific way that stuff still would remain in canon. The funny thing is, this movie jumps back to, what did I say, like 2230 or whatever. And that's where they decided to reboot events. Once the Kelvin was destroyed, we lost, I don't know, hundreds of lives and ship, and events were altered at this point. And honestly, they would say one little blade of grass being altered in the past will affect the future. Well, hundreds of people dying, a ship being destroyed, Romulan presence there. Because in the original show, which took place 30 years later, they have never seen the Romulans.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a big Romulan war, so they're aware of who the Romulans are, but like when the Romulans hailed the Kelvin, they weren't surprised. They looked like Vulcans, which they should have been because events were not altered at that point. What I was going to say was, it's funny that, considering the least popular Star Trek show at this point was...
Enterprise,
and that is the only show they actually kept in canon, because that took place before the events of the Kelvin timeline. So let's reboot all of Star Trek and save the shittiest Star Trek out there. And don't get me wrong, much loved Enterprise, but it is the worst of the shows at the time.
Yes.
Voyager not being too far behind, but it's just amusing they keep what killed Star Trek to a point and throw everything else out the window. So now it shoots ahead 20 years later, something like that. Most of the movie still takes place a little bit further in the future, but you're on Earth. I don't remember specifically what state it was in or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Iowa, okay. Mm-hmm. So they're in a bar, and you go in there, loud music playing, it's partying, cool. You see who you find out is Uhura going to the bar and ordering drinks. I want 6 Budweiser Classics, this, a Cardassian Sunrise. I specifically remember that, and I was like, okay, cool. And then... But their first contact with the Cardassians wasn't until quite a bit later. Yes, I guess the destruction of Kelvin forced that to happen earlier for some weird reason. I mean, it's a throwaway one little word thing, and I appreciate the reference, but canonically, it is a little bit of a contradiction, and a contradiction that I think would actually not be changed with the destruction of the USS Kelvin. But whatever. Like, I'm not trying to be that guy, even though I am that guy. But what? So they're in the bar. She gets all these drinks, and then Kirk, who's sloppy drunk, is like, "That's a lot of drinks for one girl. What's your name?" And she's ignoring him because he's drunk, slurring, etc. Of course, there's this weird alien between the two of them, too. And he's like, "What's your name? Let me know your name. Let me know your name." And she's just ignoring him. And he's like, "If you don't tell me your name, I'm going to have to make one up." And she's like, "Uhura." And he's like, "Oh, that's the name I was going to make up on you." Some of the jokes hit. Yep. But some of them are just stupid. And I'll mention the stupid parts of this movie as best I can. Kirk with the car, and there are more. So, he's talking to her, and she mentions, I'm with xenolinguistics, and you have no idea what that means. And he's like,
blah, 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 blah,
study of morphology, whatever. And she's like, oh, kind of impressive point. She caught it, he's caught her interest. She's like, okay, he's not just a dumb hick who has sex with farm animals, which is... Honestly, that line was out of place in the Star Trek movie. They're trying to be cool and hip and have, violence and action and sex all shoved in this movie. And some of that's not Star Trek, but, they're trying to usher and cater to the fans.
Would they still have farm animals then?
I imagine so. I mean, they don't have the need for them, but some people still cook with real meat. I remember O'Brien talking to Keiko in Deep Space Nine, or maybe it was Next Generation. Coincidentally, the first episode where the Kardashians appeared, speaking of them, and he talks about how his mom used to make this, that, and the other, and she's like, oh, she would handle real meat? Disgusting.
Okay.
I'm just saying, but it would be probably less common. Plus, people would probably just have, farms, an old-school tradition, even if they weren't, slaughtering their pets, I don't know what the point of farm animals are if you're not, harvesting them or whatever, but whatever.
Sidetrack.
So, Kirk is talking to Uhura, then all these other Starfleet cadets come, or I believe they're all cadets, and they're hanging out at the bar, partying after training or whatever, and he's like, is this guy bothering you? And she's like, oh, extremely, and he's like, she's like, but I can handle him. He's like, you can handle me, and he goes up to the guy, and he's like, going to slap it on him, and he's being a dick, and the guy's like, I don't know if you noticed, but there's 4 of us and 1 of you. And he's like, all right, get some more guys, and we'll have an even fight. And then he slaps on the face or something, and then the guy just completely sucker punches him, and he's bleeding out his mouth, and then he fights the guys. And Kirk, of course, is always the fighter in the shows. That was his thing. He loved to brawl, even though it was kind of stupid looking in the old show.
Yeah,
but that's Kirk. He was ladies' man, thrill seeker,
yeah.
and he always fought, and he was great at fighting, even though the fights were whatever. But he starts taking on these guys, and of course there's 4 guys, and they end up beating the shit out of him, and they're just punching him. He's got blood over his face, and then you hear that military whistle, and they all, attention, and we have, I believe, no, it's not Admiral Pike, Captain Pike. And he goes there. Bruce Greenwood, love Bruce Greenwood, awesome actor, from Nowhere Man, does a lot of Batman animated stuff, good actor. Great guy for Pike, and I love the fact they put Pike in there because he's from the unaired pilot of the original series, which is part of canon nowadays, and Christopher Pike was the captain of the Enterprise before Kirk was. Each one had a 5-year mission, and honestly, he wasn't even the first captain in the original universe. I think someone named April Shores was before him. In this one, the Enterprise hasn't even been launched yet. I remember they go on their maiden voyage, and Captain Pike's there, so there's a little bit of contradiction, but whatever, it's past the Kelvin destruction, so anything goes at this point.
Yep.
He starts talking to Kirk, everyone's gone, and Kirk's all bloody, he's got like Kleenexes in his nose, and he's telling him, join Starfleet. Starfleet needs people like you. If you're half the man your father is, Starfleet needs you. He's like, Starfleet is a peacekeeping, humanitarian armada, and I like the things he says, very, very well done. It's like, it's exactly what they are. He doesn't really mention exploration, but you know what, he's a peacekeeping, humanitarian armada. That's literally what they are. They're the military that protects this peaceful federation. And Kirk's like, and he says, your father was captain of the starship for 12 minutes and he saved 450 lives. Like, I challenge you to do better. And Kirk's, some of this is hitting him, but he's pretending it doesn't. He's like, another beer, And then Pike's like, hey, they're leaving at 8 tomorrow morning. And I can only imagine this has got to be at least 2 a.m. at this point.
Right.
I mean, I don't see Pike as a guy hanging out at the bars at 3 a.m., but it had to be at least 10, 11 o'clock when the fight broke out. So I would guess. Not necessarily. But it's late at night, and he's still drinking at this point, and he's beat up, and he's talking about, they're launching for Starfleet at 8 a.m. Of course, Kirk goes out there. And of course, right before the scene cuts, he has this,
this salt shaker
of the Kelvin, and it's kind of dumb. Was the Kelvin that big of a deal that there was, salt and pepper shakers of the Kelvin in these bars? I'm just saying.
Well, it's a Starfleet town.
Well, sure, but, was that particular set of events, important that people have salt and pepper shakers of it? I'm thinking too far into things.
So we have them now.
8 a.m., he's on his motorcycle or whatever, and then he goes and he sees the Enterprise being built on land, which doesn't really make any sense. To my knowledge, the original Enterprise never could land on planets. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm forgetting something. But they've always established in Star Trek there's a space dock and they build it in space. Whatever, not a big deal. They just want to have this cool shot where he's looking at it and it's like, oh. So he goes and enlists for Starfleet. They mention...
But remember, when he drives up, what happens?
He gives his motorcycle to some guy.
Who is the some guy?
I don't remember his name.
But...
Yeah, he's from the show 10 After Less, which we enjoyed. He's some really dumb guy, maintenance guy in that show. And, just kind of cool. Oh, that's that guy.
Yes.
But he goes to Pike and he says, 4 years? Because he said, you can become an officer in 4 years, after you do the academy. And he's like, 4 years? I'll do it 3. And Kirk was always known to be smart. I think it was said that he did the academy in 3 years or 4 years. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Kind of setting up the entire movie right there. And then we go to Starfleet Academy. Now Starfleet Academy,
No, they're in the ship, going up.
No, that's later. We're at Starfleet Academy at this point.
When he goes in, and they go to the Academy. When they go to the Academy, who goes there with them?
Yeah, McCoy. He meets McCoy. Yeah. And I don't know if I do or don't even like this. He's first of all, he's way paranoid. He's like, oh, the space and one little crack in the window. And he wasn't that extreme. Yes, they established he doesn't really like technology. I remember in the Next Generation premiere, we had Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelly as Bones. He's playing a 142-year-old or something like that. I mean, he had all this old makeup on.
Yeah.
Which I love things like that. And he refused to use the transporter. Yep. He made him shuttle him over here, which honestly, I don't remember him being like that in the old show. Resistant on technology and stuff. I mean, honestly, I don't really remember that.
But
it almost seemed like that incident in The Next Generation, they use that and, like, totally, like, amplified that in this. But whatever, it's fine. But he mentions, I just divorced my wife. She took everything except for the planet, just left me with just my bones. And he's like, oh, Bones? I'll call you Bones. And it's like, you never really knew why he was called Bones as a nickname for him, and it wasn't exactly the satisfying payoff I would want. But whatever, cool. We establish it. We have Kirk, Spock, Bones, we met Uhura, and they go to Starfleet Academy. Plenty of Easter eggs at Starfleet Academy, like we have an Orion slave girl as one of the Starfleet members. Kind of reminds me of the girl from Lower Decks, whose name is escaping me to this point. But I like that you see familiar races, you know, Vulcans, humans, Orions, Romulans, Klingons. I mean, you know, it's all there.
Yeah.
Of course, they have the stupid little sex scenes like Kurt's fooling around with the Orion girl, and then Uhura's her roommate comes in there, and she hears him breathing, and he's like in his underwear, and you see
and
Uhura,
he still tries to flirt with her.
Yeah, you see the Orion girl in her bra, then you see Uhura get down to her panties and bra, and it's just like too much of that forced sex stuff in there. Don't worry, I'm not saying like Star Trek doesn't have sex in it, because it sure does in the shows and whatnot, but it's just too much trying too hard. That's what I felt like at those moments. I don't know. I mean,
but then again, say you're a new generation and you're not familiar with it.
Star Trek has always had a stigma attached to it, that it's boring, it's cerebral, it's nerdy, and that's true. But that if that's all you think Star Trek is, then you don't know Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek has so much more than that. It has great acting, great battles, wars, ships, so much. Star Trek is not simply, you know, nerdy talking, and that it's a lot more than that. Especially the new versions of Star Trek, which this pretty much ushered in. I'd say that modern Star Trek is because of this.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, they have the Kobayashi Maru. And the Kobayashi Maru is a no-win scenario that was first established in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It's been mentioned, I don't know, throughout the shows.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they are trying to save the crew of the Kobayashi Maru from, I think, Klingons, and you always lose. And it's just what's the best way, you know, how do you handle it?
Situation.
It's a no-win situation. You get destroyed, but what do you do? What actions do you take? How do you handle your death? That's the whole point. And in the original universe, Kirk was the only one to ever pass the test, and he cheated. And here they're going to show you what happened, but they show you, and it's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Like, he's on the ship, and he's not, like, he's just so casual. He's, like, eating an apple, which, I mean, first of all, I think they would be like get rid of the apple. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
But he's just eating his apple, and they're like, oh, should we lock weapons? Like, don't bother. Not yet. And then the whole thing, like all lights go off. The whole thing, like, shuts down. Then it turns back on, and he's, like, invincible, and, like, destroys the Klingon ships, bam, bam, and he's like, destroy the Klingon ships? Successful rescue of the Kobayashi Maru? I'd say we won. Sure, Kirk cheated to win this, but I don't think it would be so freaking obvious. That just made it stupid. It's almost like he was fighting the idea of the test of no-win scenario, but honestly, that's not really what they were doing. They were just having him cheat and win, but they just made it so obvious that it came off as dumb to me. Of course, Spock is the one who made the Kobayashi Maru, or maintains it, or whatever. And then they have this huge hearing with all the cadets there.
Yeah.
Because he cheated. Okay, I think they would have a private hearing. They wouldn't have, like, hundreds of people watching them, like, accuse him of this.
Well, they're letting it be known.
With this unacceptable.
But
and he's like, I have the right to face my accuser directly. Once again, I don't know why that right would be there. So Spock has to stand up, and they talk one-on-one. He's like, you cheated the test. You know, he's like, well, it's the whole test is a cheat. It's a no-win scenario. It's like, okay, yes, that's true, and I can see if you're fighting it, but honestly, that really wasn't what happened. He was just trying to cheat and be the only one to win it. At least that's how I took it. And Spock's like, you of all people should know. And he's like, what do you mean, me of all people? He's like, your father was in the Kelvin, and, you know, and
no-win situation.
Kurt, I could tell, kind of like, was, you know, taken back a little bit by that, didn't like that.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all this, Vulcan's under attack, the planet Vulcan. And so the whole fleet is away, coincidentally, and they have to take all the cadets, which are near the end of the academy, and they have to give them all assignments right now and take the, you know, existing nearby 7 or 8 ships. That is so dumb also. Like, there are so many ways they could have orchestrated getting all these characters onto the Enterprise, and they had to do it in this way that was preposterous. I mean, the Enterprise is known as the flagship of the Federation. Right. Why would it just be sitting there? I mean, it hasn't been deployed yet, so cool, but why would they make a whole shit ton of cadets take it over? It just, to me, it's very forced and dumb.
They're not all cadets. There's just a lot of them.
I'm pretty sure they're all well, not Spock and not Pike, but I don't think there was a single other person that I was aware of on the ship. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
But you don't know all of them, though. There were so many layers to that ship.
Yeah, but it just seems a forced way to get them
on the ship, yeah.
And
even
then
though Uhura was assigned to a different
Farragut.
Yes.
It's Spock's like, that was also okay, but also kind of dumb. He's like, Uhura, USS Farragut, and she's like, why am I assigned to the Farragut? I'm the best translator out there. And he's like, well, I didn't want to show favoritism because, of course, they're dating, and I don't really like that either because Spock, I don't really see him trying to have like relationships with people.
Yes.
It's not logical at
No,
all. And
it's
honestly,
not.
it's not logical for him to be dating her, and for her to be dating him doesn't really make any sense either because he's this emotionless person that
Yes.
what are you going to get out of that
Yes.
besides the convenience of having a boyfriend who's clean, neat, and well-spoken? I mean, I'm just saying, like, but there's no, like, spark there. There wouldn't be. Of course, this Spock's a little bit more emotional than the traditional Spock. Whatever. He ends up reassigning her to the Enterprise, and he's like, all right, you're on the Enterprise. She's like, good. And it's like, eh.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're all going to their place. Of course, Kirk goes to the Enterprise, like, no, you can't go on here. You're on academic suspension. And then McCoy, and this is another dumb part, injects him with some Talarian vaccine, which causes him to get really sick. And then McCoy says, this is my patient. I have to bring him on the Enterprise. Are you going to tell the Enterprise where they leave without one of their senior medical people? Well, you're not a senior medical person. You're a freaking cadet. That's just like the other ones.
Well,
getting
unless
forced.
he was already...
He was getting forced in. No, because he wasn't. He went to Kirk with it. So this is 3 years later. They would not have graduated yet. I'm just saying. And he's not the chief medical officer. They mentioned the chief medical officer dies at one point.
Very true.
But Kirk, okay, he's sick. Cool. Like, it's a little forced and dumb. Like I said, there's so many ways they could have got him on the Enterprise. He could have just been an ensign there or whatever, and I think that would have been a little more realistic. From him to go to a cadet, an academic suspension to captain the Enterprise in like a day is preposterous. But they get on the ship, and they're on their way to Vulcan, and you see a ton of ships. They look beautiful. They're coming out of the space dock, and they all warp away, and most of them are not familiar designs, but I get it. It's all updated. And I don't have a problem with the ship designs. Like, we don't see the Excelsior or the Miranda class. Cool, whatever. It's not a big deal. In the original show, you only saw Constitution class ships, a ton of them. And I'm cool with the ship designs. But they all go to warp, and then, of course, the Enterprise can't go to warp because Sulu, who's also, an ensign or cadet or whatever, messes something up, and he's like, did you leave the parking brake on? And, like, it's kind of dumb also. But it gives them reason as to why they're late to Vulcan. The other ships get there first. At this point, Kirk is like, hand like blows up. It's like giant. That part's just stupid. And he had overheard Uhura earlier talking about some Romulan transmission or something, and then he hears about this storm in front of Vulcan. And he realizes, that's the exact same thing that happened the day the Kelvin got destroyed. The Romulans are attacking Vulcan. That's what's happening. He's trying to get to the bridge. Of course, he shouldn't be on the ship. But when he gets to the bridge, he tries to tell Pike, hey, Romulans are attacking Vulcan. The whole fleet's under attack. He's like, we're not hearing anything from the fleet. They haven't said they're under attack. He's like, the jamming our transmissions. He's like, I'm telling you. He explains his reasoning behind everything. And even Spock says, the cadet's logic is sound. Red alert. Put your shields up. Bam, they drop out of warp. Debris everywhere. Noise, all this stuff going on. And it's kind of a high tense situation. They're going between everything. They're kind of scraping on debris, but all the ships are destroyed before they even got there in the 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, Nero's technology is far superior to them, and he wiped those ships out like that. They get there, and
even though it's a mining ship.
Yeah, it's a mining ship, but it has. I'm just saying, at the time they had Borg technology, but even though it's a mining ship, it's this giant mining ship,
huge,
from well over 100 years in the future. The technology itself is going to be that much more advanced. I mean, whatever. In this part where they jump out of warp and there's debris everywhere, I've never actually seen this, and I've looked for it a ton of times. I'm told there's a little R2-D2 floating in the debris, because J.J. Abrams was this huge Star Wars fan and wanted to do a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Just saying. And I appreciate little Easter eggs like that, but we don't really need an R2-D2 in the Star Wars movie. There are so many Star Trek things you could have put in that little part.
Yes.
Whatever. Like I said, I've looked for this thing many times and never actually seen it, besides an image online where it's circled or whatever. But they get there, and he fires some torpedoes at the Enterprise. They have shields go damn near gone immediately, and it makes sense. They're so superior technologically. And Mira looks at the ship, and he's like, hold on, magnify, and you can see USS Enterprise. And, of course, everyone knows the Enterprise. It's a very popular ship in history. They all know, everyone knows who Captain Kirk is, everyone knows who Spock is, everyone knows the Enterprise made, contact with so many species, and so many historic missions, and peace with the Klingons, and all that sort of stuff. But he also very personally knows Spock. So he knows the history, and he hails them, and he's like, hi, I'm Nero. It comes off kind of dumb the way he just so casually says that. And he's, like, talking to Pike, and he's, like, they're like, ceasefire, we'll meet with the Romulans and have a diplomatic solution, you've started war. And he's like, I don't stand with the Romulan Empire, I stand separately, just like your Vulcan crew member, Spock. And Spock's like, I do not believe we've met. And he's like, no, we've not met yet. Kind of, and the Enterprise people are all sort of confused, they don't really understand, and I mean, how could they?
Yeah, no one knows.
So, of course, he does the same thing, says, Captain Pike, take a shuttle, come to my ship. And his whole point of doing that is he wants to get the frequencies of, like, the Starfleet to know where all their defense force is, even though it damn sure doesn't look like he needs any help with that stuff.
Right.
But he's basically trying to take out the entire Federation. He's mad. His whole purpose is, in the future, Romulus got destroyed. Old Spock promised to help them by making a black hole and sucking in the supernova that happened and saving their planet. Unfortunately, it happened too early, or somehow it didn't work. He was able to suck up the supernova, but Romulus was destroyed.
Too late, yeah.
And destroyed Romulus, as well as probably numerous other Romulan planets, and millions, probably billions of Romulans would have died at that point, including Nero's family, his wife and kids. And so now he wants revenge against Spock and the Federation, although really Spock's trying to help them. So I get frustrated sometimes, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, blah, 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 blah. They also make a plan at this point. Nero's ship has this giant thing going into the core of Vulcan, and this really all happens pretty quickly in the movie, and it happens off screen. They get there and it's already going on, and his whole plan is to destroy Vulcan. He wants to basically pay Spock back for Romulus getting destroyed, even though Spock didn't destroy Romulus. He just wasn't successful at saving it. But Nero's logic is, Romulan people would have evacuated if you didn't make these promises. There's probably some truth to that. Although if you watch Picard, I guess they were trying to evacuate them, and also Starfleet failed at that. So that would give him more motivation to be mad at
We're
Starfleet.
not to that yet.
But I'm saying from his point of view, this stuff would have actually, this stuff would have already happened. So it gives him more reason to hate the Federation and want revenge on them. You don't know it yet, but he has already met old Spock. And actually that scene probably did happen in the movie where the ship came out. So old Spock went back in time, and Nero went back in time, because Spock made this black hole to suck up the supernova, which worked, but then somehow it sucked him in and sent them both back in time. Which, black hole. Somehow that happened. It's just plot convenience. Yeah. But Nero went back to a certain point, and Spock came out like 18 years later, and I'm not really sure how Nero knew, but he was like right there when Spock came out. So he captures Spock, takes his shuttle, keeps it, and maroons Spock on some planet because he wants Spock to see Vulcan get destroyed. And now that he sees new Spock, he's kind of like, I can have both of them get destroyed. He's like, Spock, I have something I want you to see. You don't really know what he's talking about at this point. So Pike is going to the Romulan ship by himself, but he has Kirk and Sulu and Olsen, that was his name, a red shirt. He said, Pike says, I need people with hand-to-hand combat. And he's like, Kirk, you're with me. You're not supposed to be here anyway. So he brings Kirk. Sulu says, I have hand-to-hand combat experience. And he's like, what hand-to-hand combat? He's like, fencing, because in the show, he was fencing. It's sort of a thing he's known for. And it's like, well, that's not going to help much at all. Right. And then you got this guy, Olsen, who's like, big, giant, like, yeah, going to kick some Romulan ass. Yeah. And they go there, and as the shuttle's going to Nero's ship, these three guys drop in spacesuits going down to the mining thing that's in the planet's core. And I mean, you would think Nero, with the almost 25th century technology, would detect three people jumping out of the shuttle that is literally going toward them. There's nothing else going on. It's like they're looking right at the shuttle, probably. But whatever. They don't notice it. So go down to the mining operation while Pike goes on there. Pike gets questioned by Nero, and he refuses to help, as any good Starfleet captain would do. He asks him all these questions. He's like, no, Romulus not destroyed, it's still out there. And he's like, don't tell what happened, I know what happened, I saw it happen. And he doesn't really understand he's from the future. It doesn't really make sense to them. And on Nero's ship, he has these little, I don't know, I forget what they're called, Centaurian slugs or something like that. And they seem like an homage to Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, when Khan had those earwig things that would mind control you. And he's like, these things will wrap around your cerebrum and allow me to get the information I need. And like Star Trek always does, he says, tell me the frequencies of the ships. And he's like, Captain Pike, USS Enterprise, serial number, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what they always say when they're being tortured. Like, just keep repeating that, repeating that. But you can't fight these slug things in your brain. It's this giant thing. He's like, shows him putting it in his mouth. And then you cut to Kirk and them. They're all, like, flying down. They go through the atmosphere in their spacesuits, which, I mean, their technology is good, so maybe their spacesuits are good enough to withstand the atmosphere, but typically you think they would just get burned up. But also don't know the details about Vulcan's atmosphere compared to Earth's atmosphere. Blah, 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 whatever. So they land there, and of course, Olsen,
has to be
idiot guy's like, they're like, pull your chute! He's like, no, get closer, pull your chute! And he pulls it right at the last second. And he lands, and his chute, like, gets caught in the fire, and he gets sucked and dies. Then Kirk lands. I think he also didn't, he was, like, getting sucked down, and had to, like, pull this thing off. I don't know. And then Sulu also got, like, his thing got, like, shot his... Yeah. And then he had barely landed on there. But, so Sulu and Kirk get there. They're fist-fighting these Romulans outside. Of course, Romulans have guns. Sulu and Kirk do not. Sulu pulls out some fencing sword, and they're fighting, and Romulan guy has...
Why would they not have phasers?
They do have phasers. I think Kirk's like fell off or something. That's like he pulled it out and got like knocked down.
Yes.
As always happens. But it's kind of cool. You know, this fist fight, it comes out pretty good. They ended up tricking the Romulan, or not, you know, they beat the Romulans. And they can't beam up or communicate with the ship until they destroy this mining thing, and they just start like shooting with phasers. And something happens, and it knocks them off the little mining platform, and they're falling down to their death. Yeah. Sulu falls off. Kirk jumps out after him because Sulu's chute is destroyed. Kirk's not, and he pulls the chute off, and I guess he can't support their both weight, so it flies off, and he's like, beam us up, and they're trying to, you know, they're you can see them on the computer, they're falling down, and they can't lock onto them because they're moving so fast, and Chekhov's like, I can do it, and he's like running through the corridor to get down there, and I don't know, it's also a little dumb. And he knows, like, I don't know, like a skeletal lock or something like that, and he beams them on. And it's a kind of cool scene where they come onto the transporter pad, and they're like, because they're falling so hard, they like land and break the, you know, I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. Chekhov, to me, I don't have a problem with his acting, but he doesn't look at all like Chekhov. Like, he has short, curly hair, whereas the Chekhov of the old show, this big, giant, sort of like Beatles-looking monkeys, bushy hair.
Yes, that's exactly who he looked like,
Whatever. Rest in peace, Anton Yelchin, who passed away after the third one of these movies. The original Chekhov is actually still alive, but not the new one. Whatever. I just didn't really like the way he looked. Uhura I thought looked good. Acting, it was okay. Chekhov, I had kind of an issue with how he looked.
Well, and he was also supposed to be 17.
Yeah. He's like one of the younger cadets, I guess. Because you'd think you'd get in at like 17 and then be 21 or 22 when you get out, but I don't know what, you know, their age criteria for Starfleet is in this universe, or the regular universe for that matter. Right. So, they're back on the ship, and then Spock understands they're about to destroy the planet. They're dropping like gravitational whatever they're doing, and he's like, oh, the Vulcan High Council is in the caves of whatever, we can't contact them, so he beams down there when the planet's like falling apart. He goes into there, actually saves most of the Vulcan High Council, but of course his mom, who is a human, played by Winona Ryder, which is kind of funny, and not funny, but you know,
it's interesting.
But she doesn't get beamed up; she dies
too far.
And as soon, well, no, her piece of ground fell, and
she
fell
was
down.
too far away. She was the furthest one away.
And he's like, I'm losing her. But he saves the majority of the Vulcan High Command, so there's... They can, you know, I don't know, save some of their society or history or whatever. Yeah. Then the planet gets engulfed by a black hole and goes into nothing. Actually, at this point, Kirk had gotten kicked off the ship. Or had that not happened yet? No, that hadn't happened yet. And so both Spocks actually watched the planet Vulcan get destroyed, which is Nero's payback to Spock for letting Romulus get destroyed, and he actually twofold let both versions of Spock see it, which, you know, that sucks. But at this point I'm like, oh wow, like, they've totally altered things. Like, we can't have the same universe, not even close. They've, like, I mean, wiped out millions or billions of Vulcans, and they're a founding planet in the Federation. It's like, okay, like, at first it's like, okay, you know, they're slightly different sets of events, but when that happened I was like, oh shit, this is like unsalvageable at this point, and I was kind of like, damn, that sucks. Vulcan will never going to get to like the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. All that stuff will be very different. Hell, for all I know, Tuvok was on the planet and got destroyed. I don't know.
Yeah.
And they're gone. The Enterprise is at that point trying to meet up with the rest of Starfleet, so that when they fight Nero again, they have at least a chance. But Nero's ship is heading toward Earth because he wants to do to Earth what he did to Vulcan, and basically destroy both Spock's homeworlds, Vulcan and Earth, because he's from both. And he also wants to cripple the Federation and give Romulus a future where they're going to be powerful and not have the Federation and be alter the sense of event in favor of Romulus. And I get it, it's a typical villain thing to do. So on the Enterprise bridge, Kirk goes there and confronts Spock about joining the rest of the fleet. He's like, we have to go stop Nero's ship, they're heading toward Earth, and Spock's like, no, and he's strengthened numbers. And he's like, Pike ordered us to get him when we're done. But Spock's in command and knows, honestly, this is not what Pike would want. Pike would not want them to just throw... They have no chance of taking down Nero's ship. Not at all. So, Kirk just won't stop, and Spock's like, throw him off the ship, which... whatever. He sends him to some planet. Honestly, Kirk shouldn't be there anyway. He's killing him. You could just put him in the brig, but for whatever reason... Well, for plot convenience purposes, honestly, they've put him on some planet. He gets sent to the planet. He's down there, and it's an ice planet. Some giant monster thing is chasing him. He gets chased into a cave, and who saves him but old Spock, Leonard Nimoy. He has like a little torch and chases this monster thing away. Now, Leonard Nimoy is Spock in the original show, in all the original films, and he even reprised his role in Star Trek The Next Generation because Vulcans live a very long life. They live, like 300 years, so even in the events of Picard, if Spock hadn't gone back in time, he probably would still be alive. Rest in peace, Leonard Nimoy, by the way. So, you got old Spock, and he explains... in the future, Romulus getting destroyed, him being captured, him getting removed on this planet in order to watch Vulcan die. And he ends up mind-melding with Kirk to show him we're good friends, this is how my timeline is. And, because when he sees him, he's like, Captain of the Enterprise. And he's like, I'm not captain. He's like, Spock's captain. He's like, what? It's all backwards. He's like, Spock marooned me here. And he's like, what? You're not best friend, you're not helping each other. He's like, you cannot be deprived of the benefits that your relationship will have. Mind melds with him, which is a gross violation of the Prime Directive, the Temporal Prime Directive, all that sort of stuff. But whatever, it allows Kirk to sort of be up to speed on things at this point. And then they go to a nearby Starfleet facility, where they meet Scotty and some other little shriveled up alien thing that's...
like a little Ewok.
Yeah, but he's like, I don't know, a hard looking skin like rock or like lizard or something.
Or like
he doesn't talk. But he's just like a little like joke, and you know what? Like, it's dumb, but like whatever. It's not even a big deal. Like that stuff doesn't bother me too much. With some of the other stuff, like giant bloated Kirk hand and other stuff, is just dumb. And they have this stupid technology. So Spock's like, "Oh, you know how to do transwarp beaming, where you can beam light years away." He's like, "You just haven't invented it yet."
Shit.
He's like, "You just haven't invented it yet." So he gives him the equation that apparently Scotty comes up with later, which damn sure is not established in the shows after that, so it doesn't really make any sense. It's another plot convenience, and they could have found a better way to handle that. Long story short, Scotty and Kirk beam onto the Enterprise, which is at high warp, light years away. That technology's not even there in the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine period, much less before Scotty passed away. I don't know, maybe he invented that after he came back in Next Generation, in the episode, whatever. Yeah. You can try to speculate all you want. It's just forced in there for convenience. And he makes this Easter egg mention about how he transported Admiral Archer's Beagle really far away, and I can't imagine that's the same Jonathan Archer from Enterprise, even though that's damn sure what they're implying, but he would have been so old at that point. I mean, I think Enterprise is like 80 years for the original show. So, I mean, I guess he could be like 120 or something. People live a lot longer because the medical tech is better, but he had a Beagle in the show.
Yeah, but that dog would have been
Well,
dead,
the dog would be, yes, but you can get another Beagle. He didn't mention it's Porthos. He mentioned Admiral Archer's Beagle.
Yeah.
Cool little reference, but I don't know if it could be Admiral Archer's son, and he has a Beagle. There's like a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool to hear that, because that was clearly a reference to Enterprise. And I enjoy the references and Easter eggs. even though some don't make as much sense as the others.
Mm-hmm.
But now they beam onto the Enterprise, and of course Kirk beams here, and Scotty somehow beams into this thing next to him. It's like a water filtration. I don't know what it is. And honestly, it doesn't make any sense, because I would imagine that water on the ship, they use it, and then it gets, like, immediately recycled, and, you know, and like, it wouldn't go through the ship.
Probably that's the whole recycling thing.
In my head, I just imagine, like, a replicator. You put it in there, it just disappears. Like, the water would, like, just be like, you know, but whatever. It doesn't matter. It's another dumb part where he's just going through all these water tubes, and Kirk lets him out, and then security stops him. And it's the same security guy that got into the bar fight with him at the beginning. Mm-hmm. He's like, surrender, cupcake. Mm-hmm. Then he takes him up to Spock, and of course, old Spock told him the only way for him to win this is become Captain of the Enterprise. And Kirk's like, you're Captain of the Enterprise, you hate me, what can I do? Yeah. And he's like, you have to show that I'm emotionally unfit. So Kirk's like, how do you feel that you don't love your mom? You know, all this stuff. And like, he's like, you have no emotion, and you don't care about any of them. And finally, he says enough to get Spock to like attack him. And Spock's like trying to kill him. He's like choking him, and finally, I think his dad's like, enough, and he stops, and he says, I'm unfit for command. Of course, earlier when Pike left, he says, I'm promoting you to first officer. It just all happens so fast, and it's so convenient. It's definitely forced. I think they could have handled that whole cadet and promotion thing a little better. So all of a sudden, Kirk is captain. He went from academic suspension, cadet, not even graduating. I mean, they may have resolved that, to captain like within like 2 days or less.
Yeah.
But whatever, here we are. We now have Captain Kirk. And Spock goes away, you know, I don't know, go sulk in his quarters or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Kirk's like, all right, let's do this. I'm ordering us back to Nero's ship. We're going to save Earth, blah, 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 all this stuff. And honestly, I don't know what exactly his plan is, because there's no match. Like, even 10 Enterprises wouldn't be able to beat the... I don't even know what Nero's ship's called.
Right, yeah.
So they're going that way. Like I said, I don't really know what their plan is, but I think they use that beaming again to beam them onto his ship. Yes. So he's at Earth, and he's all the way at Earth at this point, right? Like, they meet him at Earth? Or is it just close to Earth? I don't fully remember. So they get there. Before they get there, you know, Spock goes back on the bridge. He's like, "Hey,
to Earth, because they're...
I mean, they're trying to destroy Earth. So they're right there, but he's like, do you need another first officer? And so it's like, but when Spock resume command, if he's not emotionally fit, if he's not emotionally fit, he's not going to serve at all. He wouldn't go to also be first officer. But whatever, it's in order to make things status quo like they were in the original show.
Yeah.
Whatever, we're finally where we should be with all the main, members at the right places. Chekhov, Sulu, Scotty. And Scotty, of course, like, he's not even a member of the Enterprise. He's not the chief engineer at this point. But you got all the main characters, and they beam on the ship, Spock and Kirk, and they mention that we're going to try to save Pike, we're going to try to disable the ship, we got to save Earth. So they get on there, and he mentions, we're going to beam you to a cargo bay with no one around. They beam on there, and there's like 20 Romulans everywhere. So they immediately, but they have these phaser pistols that look good. They look like the original show phasers, a little updated, but they have the pew pew instead of the tss, tss. It's just those little familiar things I wish were a little bit more familiar. But they're fighting in there, and the Enterprise, I don't know where the Enterprise is, but it's hiding or something. It's not like fighting them.
Yeah.
Spock gets on. That's what they're trying to do. Kirk's going to save Pike, and Spock was going to get Spock's, it's called like a jellyfish ship or something, and he was going to try to detonate the red matter and destroy Nero's ship. He takes that futuristic ship out of there, and Nero's chasing him. He's like, fire everything! And all these torpedoes are going. And then bam, of course, the Enterprise in this really feel-good moment comes out and shoots all the torpedoes down, protects the Spock's ship. He drops the red matter and makes a black hole. Pike, Kirk, and Spock all get beamed onto the Enterprise, and Scotty says, like, I've never beamed 3 targets from 2 different places. And whatever. Yeah. It's like, you're beaming from a light year. Like, that seems much less complicated than what you did earlier. But whatever. And Nero's ship is getting sucked into this black hole. Of course, Kirk's like, hello, we are ready to offer you assistance that you will need. And he's like, I would rather suffer the death of Romulus 100 times over than take help from you. And he's like, all right, fire. And they start shooting at him, and it's like, not exactly Starfleet-esque, but whatever. They caused the death of, honestly, millions, billions of people at this point. Yeah. And completely altered the chain of events. Mm-hmm. They even have a moment in the film where they use dialogue, and they're like, oh, they went back and altered events, causing a whole new universe. It's like, you didn't really have to, like, spoon-feed that to the audience, I don't think, at this point. Well, yeah. But it's like telling you exactly what's going on. I mean, like, not only did they do this, but they want to make sure we have exposition to tell you about it. So they beat Nero. They save Earth. Do not save Vulcan. And I think at this point, they're on Earth?
Yeah.
Talking? Not sure how old Spock got there at this point, because they left him on that... maybe they transport beamed him over there, I don't know. But old Spock is there, and young Spock thinks it's his dad. He's like, hey, father. And he turns out, he's like, I am not our father. And he's like, there are so few of us left, we cannot hide from each other anymore. And you get the impression earlier that if young Spock finds out about old Spock, that it's going to cause like a...
paradox or something.
But really, old Spock's like talking to young Spock, and he's like, I implied there would be a time paradox if, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then we have old Spock going to help make the new Vulcan. They've already found like a planet to settle on. Mm-hmm. Happened all very fast, honestly. Mm-hmm. But bam, that's pretty much the end of the movie. And then it sets up, at the end, I think Kirk is the captain of the ship. We got Spock. The whole team's there, and then they go off to go on the next mission, which is...
Also interesting, because you would think that they would go back to the Academy and finish.
I guess after they established how successful they were, and honestly, they saved Earth. They saved billions of people. They saved almost damn near the entire Federation, or at least to a point. Yeah. You have a little ceremony where they promote Kirk to captain. Your exemplary event, heroism, and they promote him. And you see Pike there in a wheelchair, just like he was in the original continuity. But of course, events are very different. And
he's not.
No, perfect. I love little Easter eggs like this and references. Yeah, he's not in
the beep, 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 beep.
Which is ridiculous in the old show for today's standards.
Yes.
But it works, and he's like, I stand relieved, I relieve you, I pass, command to you, and then Kirk is now the captain of the Enterprise, but he skipped ensign, lieutenant commander, all that stuff, and went straight to captain. It seems like, I don't care if you save Earth, I don't really see them doing that.
No.
Same time, he saved Earth. And so they did that.
Right.
I mean, he did save Earth in the original continuity, and they forgave all these crimes they were accusing him of. That's right, and bumped him down from admiral to captain.
Which he was grateful for.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole of the movie, it's fun. The story has a lot of conveniences and forced stuff, but I do appreciate that they did this reboot and they took it from the main canon. Like, we have old Spock, we have the destruction of Romulus, and that stuff, it almost passed the torch for this new universe. And now that we've gone back to the Prime universe, they're still referencing these events because the show Picard takes place after Romulus was destroyed, and that's a huge plot point in the show. So it gives these Kelvin movies a place in the overall Star Trek canon, the Prime timeline, and that I appreciate. I think Kirk was a fantastic... the actor was fantastic. Chris Pine. Fantastic guy to replace William Shatner. Not exactly a William Shatner, but it worked as Kirk.
Yeah.
Spock, I thought, also was great. Zachary Quinto, I think. McCoy. He made a decent McCoy. I didn't really have a problem with him. Karl Urban. And we have numerous actors from The Boys, which we love that show. Got Karl Urban, who's Butcher. We also have Scotty, who plays Huey's father. Another Star Trek reference, Huey is Boimler on the Star Trek Lower Decks, who looks just like him. I love these little keeping the family type things.
But then also, Karl Urban was in Riddick.
And Lord of the Rings, and Judge Dredd, a lot of things.
Yes.
He's badass nowadays. Yeah. And I mean, you have Chris Hemsworth as Kirk's father, he wasn't Thor yet at the time. That happened afterwards, so... He's a lot thinner than he is now. He's all big and buff now. But it's really cool to see all these actors. I thought she looked good. I really didn't have a problem with her. Chekhov, I think, didn't look right. Scotty also, I felt like, didn't really look like I pictured Scotty back then. But it wasn't that bad. It's all a re-envisioning, and it works. Then you have Sulu. Honestly, we're just fine.
Yeah.
The cast did a good job. I like the cast. The acting is good. The way it was shot was good. The sleekness of the ships, the designs. Really, I don't have a lot of complaints with that sort of stuff. And usually I'm the first one to be like, the phasers aren't good, the ships aren't good, they did this should have been like this, the warp nacelle should have been like this, oh my god. Yeah. No, I'm cool with all of it for the most part. The ship battles were fine. The Romulan thing, it works. It's odd that they would choose to have the Romulans be the main villain after they just had the Romulans as the main villain in the last film, which was not received well by fans.
But it wasn't really the Romulans. It was the...
Well, the Romulans and the Remans and a human clone of Picard being the... But it was the Romulan Empire.
Yeah.
Even though the Romulan Empire sort of disowned them at the end. But it's odd to do the Romulans again. And canon-wise, there are some things that don't fully make sense. I doubt the Romulans... Well, I guess they... In the original universe, there was a Romulan war that took place right after the show Enterprise, and it was a huge, brutal war, but they never actually saw the Romulans. They mentioned this in the original series where they have the neutral zone, and they haven't had an encounter with the Romulans in like 80 years since the Enterprise timeline, and they never actually saw them. So when they saw them, they were like so shocked that they looked like Spock. In this universe, when like the Kelvin first sees them, they're not really surprised at all, which I'm being nitpicky at this point, but here are the facts. The movie itself, good directing, a lot of good things going for it, but there's also plenty of stupid stuff, and it's not really aimed at your traditional Star Trek audience. But the whole point is the traditional Star Trek audience
is old
and weaning, and the franchise didn't have enough loyal fans that were going to go see anything to keep it going, unfortunately. If I were to rate this movie, well, it's such a difficult thing. I have so much to say about this movie, and so many feelings that are positive and negative about this movie.
That's okay. I'll say it's an 8.5.
I would
a 9,
not.
I enjoyed
give it that much. I would not give it that high of a rating. I don't like it has. First of all, even if you forget all the like nitpicky stuff that I have about it, it has plenty of stupid stuff
the nostalgia,
and plot conveniences, stuff that doesn't make sense. It was like forced in there, like the cadets getting promoted. Kirk getting murdered on the planet, like, it's just so many things. The transwarp beaming, like, so much stuff that was...
But it's the nostalgia, and then you get to see the little tiny snippets, like, you don't really see...
No, I love the nostalgia, I do.
Yeah.
And the music, very good, like, it's, like, signature to this particular universe. I love Pike. I thought it was really cool they included Pike for Greenwood, like, so much stuff I like about it, and they took the canon, and they did a good job honoring it. They did a very good job honoring it. But 8.5 is... I don't even think I gave Wrath of Khan 8.5 or First Contact, which are my favorite Star Trek movies.
It's okay.
I'd probably give it like a 7. And that's probably fair. In some ways I want to go like a 6.5. No, 7. I'm going to give this thing a 7. It is probably the best of the original films. Although I like Into Darkness. People seem to hate it. Star Trek Beyond. I don't hate it, but it has plenty of dumb stuff as well. And we'll get to that soon.
What would have been best, the greatest thing ever? Jeffrey Combs.
He should.
Could you imagine if they had added him into that somewhere?
No, but they're just trying to distance themselves from the previous because it had such.
Yes, but the newer generation doesn't know who Jeffrey Combs is, so bring him in.
I would have rather seen him in some of the newer shows myself, but whatever. Yes, he is the epitome of like the most versatile. He's a great actor, and he's in like all the Star Trek shows. It's different characters. I'd love to see him in anything, honestly.
Yeah.
But I say 7 out of 10. It's a well-made movie, and it honors Star Trek, but it's also sort of like not Star Trek. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It has the more Star Wars feel.
Which is fine. I like Star Wars too. I know, just saying. But there's just... And I guess, like, a hardcore Star Trek fan like myself, that's the kind of people that don't like this movie or have a problem with it. Casual fans really actually like this movie a lot. And I was able to get past a lot of my, like, preconceived notions or, like, stickler for canon type things. But not all. So, it is a good movie. Not a great movie, but it's better than good. And it's in the top half of Star Trek movies, that's for sure. like out of the 13 films, I mean, it's probably like number like 5 or something.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'd say Wrath of Khan's better, First Contact is better. Maybe Star Trek 3 and 4 and 6 are better. That sort of area. Generations. I mean, it's all subjective, but I like the movie. At the time, I was very resistant and sort of bitter about the fact that they're rebooting it. And once they destroyed Vulcan, I was just like, damn, there's no hope to sort of like put this movie like back on track and have the same future they had before, which is always sort of my hope. I'm like, oh, well, these things happened, and now Kirk's in charge of the Enterprise. They're all okay. They're all going to sort of like put it back on the right now. It's not possible. But the movie did very well financially, which I'm happy about. That Star Trek, my God, if this one failed, Star Trek would have been probably put to rest for a very long time. And here we are. I mean, until about 1 year ago, there were 5 different Star Trek shows actively going on. Now, I think 2 of them are done, but Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. Don't get me wrong, Prodigy is aimed at little kids. Lower Decks is actually pretty fun if you're a Star Trek fan. Picard may not be exactly what I hoped it would be, but it's good, and you finally get back in that time period. Discovery, I've not finished. I've only watched the first couple seasons. It's good, not great, and it has some problems as well. I haven't watched Strange New Worlds yet, but we're going to be jumping on those things very soon. Star Trek had a resurgence, and I'd say if it weren't for this movie, it never would have had that opportunity. Or the resurgence would be a lot different, or later, or who knows what. This movie being popular really helped usher in the new era of Star Trek. The newer shows look a lot like these movies, honestly.
Yeah.
Like the effects, the way the ships look, the sort of action-y and like casual take on canon, which I can appreciate. I saw some quote from Leonard Nimoy talking about canon, and he's like, I don't know, canon is something for like hardcore, but what he's basically like, just enjoy the franchise. Don't think too much into it, as long as they're, you know, keeping it true to its core and nature, whatever. I do like the movie Star Trek. It's the first movie ever to simply be called Star Trek. The first one was Star Trek the Motion Picture, and here we have Star Trek. A lot of people call it Star Trek 1, like the first Star Trek movie. I personally consider it Star Trek 11, but I never really see it referred to as Star Trek 11. I more so see it referred to as Star Trek 1, like these ones as 1, 2, 3 versus 11, 12, 13.
Star Wars.
We haven't had a Star Trek movie in a long time, and current rumor is we're going to be getting a streaming Section 31 movie. They've been talking about that for so long, I got to see it to believe it, but I want more Star Trek movies. But this one's good. I like it. I don't love it, but I like it a lot, actually. And time has made me like it more. Like, when it first came out, I did like it when it came out. We saw it in theaters together back in 2009. I liked it, but honestly, the fact that they're back in the prime timeline and have restored that makes me like this movie even more, because the damage that I thought it was going to do to the franchise, basically killing off all of Star Trek, I'm so happy that they kind of course-corrected and decided to take, these 750 movies or 750 episodes and 10 movies still matter, still happen, still exist, because I was like, what are they going to do, like a Kelvin version of Next Generation? Like, what the hell is this going to get? Cool. Yeah. Everything's back the way that I would like it to be. Mostly. Mostly. So, this is dHunter and my lovely wife Patricia bringing you another Star Trek movie. The next one we'll do is going to be Into Darkness. We'll do that sometime in the near future. So, if you like the video, press like below. If you have anything you want to say about the video, add to the comment section. If you want to see additional movie and action figure videos from me, press subscribe. I do appreciate when you do that. Once again, this is dHunter. Love like Patricia. Live long and prosper. And thank you guys for watching.